Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We are excited to have Gary and Christina from EazyStock here today. They will be presenting on Build Resiliency into your supply chain with better inventory management. I know you're all eager to get started with this presentation, so before we begin, as a reminder, we're recording this webinar and we'll be posting it to our on-demand webinar library for you to review or to share with anyone. If you have any questions during this presentation, please feel free to type them into the questions box and we will answer them at the end of our session during our Q&A. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gary to kick off our presentation.
Good afternoon and morning, everyone. It's great to be here today. Thanks, Joe. I'm going to go ahead and say hi to everybody on video, and then I'm going to go ahead and shut that off here as we get started with the presentation. But really glad to be here. Joining me today is Christina Alexandra Bostina from EazyStock as well. She's part of our amazing customer success team. She's one of our customer success managers here at EazyStock. Her and her team really help our customers become extremely successful with all the functionality and aspects of our inventory optimization software. She'll be joining us a little later here in the presentation, but let's get rolling for today and we'll get started here. So first off, just kind of covering a quick agenda, right? We're going to talk about supply chain resilience today, what it is. We're going to talk about how you build that into a complete supply chain management process. And then Christina is going to kind of jump in here towards the middle of the presentation and kind of talk about how EazyStock looks at that and how you can use some of those tools from an inventory optimization, inventory management standpoint. We'll give you a little bit about EazyStock, and then we have a great offer for you at the end of the presentation today, and we'll cover some next steps. So that's what we're going to talk about here in the next 50 minutes or so, and I'm really excited to begin. So let's just jump right in, right? So the first thing is probably really defining supply chain resilience, right? Supply chain resilience to us here at EazyStock, right, as we think about it, is much more than just minimizing the day-to-day risks, right? It's truly about managing and adapting to the unknown that's coming at us from all different angles. Resilient companies today, they've put systems in place, they've put processes in place that not only help them to adapt to supply chain disruption, but they also need to be able to absorb the additional stress, be able to recover from potential things that are coming at them and be able to thrive in whatever circumstances they're in. And of course, today we're seeing a lot of different circumstances come at us from multiple different directions. So, one of the things that I think about is since the pandemic started, supply chain shortages have plagued multiple different industries, from the automotive industry to CPG. As consumers, most of us were at home, and we were spending a lot of time reducing the amount of money we were spending on services, and we started to really consume more products than ever before, having stuff delivered to our homes more frequently. A lot of that stuff just exacerbated the entire manufacturing industry with delays. We saw in the automotive industry huge computer chip shortages, worker shortages, of course, continue. And these were just making the supply chain even worse to deal with from the start of this. And truly, I think I've seen some reports recently where there's economists out there that are predicting that these shortages probably are going to continue into 2023 as manufacturers and distributors really try to recover from the last couple of years. So in order to manage customer expectations through this time, right, I think it's imperative for all the brands out there to begin to clearly and really proactively communicate with consumers, their customers, right? We need to be able to provide them with amazing flexibility and choice. And we're going to talk about today why that's so vitally important, and being able to monitor your inventory levels, adjusting those according to customer demand. And really, I look at this supply chain thing and I say to myself, it's going to correct itself, right? Over a short period of time, across a timeline, there's only going to be a couple of years of disruption, right? We're going to get back to being able to handle these things better than we've ever been able to before. But the one thing that we need to keep at the core of this, I believe, is that mishandling customers' expectations through not having a resilient supply chain are the things that are going to impact us very for a long time, right? Being able to lose retention, being able to lose your brand's loyalty is just a huge part of of what we're looking at here as we think about building supply chain resilience. I think PwC does a fantastic job of outlining this, right? They talk about it's not just about playing defense, it's about playing offense. It's finding a competitive advantage by shaping a supply chain resilience strategy focused on disruption and avoidance. So it's figuring out the pieces of the puzzle that are causing those disruptions and really, again, being able to react to them in any circumstance. There's a couple of pieces to this puzzle, right? When we think about how we're going to build out the supply chain resilient program, right? The coronavirus pandemic had significant, really big, significant global supply chain vulnerabilities. We all saw it. This is nothing new. The national lockdowns of factories. We had various supplier locations, like in China, for instance, that just shut down. And there was kind of a mad scramble to be able to find alternative sourcing, to be able to meet all of this volatile demand that we had. And truthfully, while COVID was probably this once in a lifetime generation pandemic that affected us so greatly, the supply chain disruption of this magnitude really isn't anything new. And the supply chain's been affected by multiple other things over the course of time, right? So we think about geopolitical events, right? We've had Brexit in Europe. We've had the US-China trade wars that affected it. Legislation and regulation have been a big part of disrupting the supply chain over time. Maybe not to the level of COVID, but we've had the CARES Act here in America that has definitely affected it. We've had the UK-EU trade agreement, the TCA, right after Brexit, following that has definitely made an impact on that. And I know all of you that are out there listening to us today, you're not living in a bubble, so it's not new to see cyber attacks continuing to increase across all businesses, but really against the vendors in the supply chain. There is critical company and sensitive information in the supply chain. So again, we're going to continue to see that trend. I think the cyber industry is doing a fantastic job at trying to stop these attacks, and our IT groups are working hard to make sure that's happening. But it is a big piece to this interdependency of all of these pieces. The other thing we're seeing, and I can use this as a great example, I live and I'm coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today, and it's April 20th, and the last 2 days I was in the middle of a little snowstorm. I can't even remember in my whole life having a snowstorm in April, right? So the idea that there's these natural disasters occurring, there's a climate change that's affecting everything that we're doing in the supply chain is real. I think over the last couple of weeks in the US, we've seen these tornadoes in the Midwest and in the South that have just been devastating. That definitely has caused flight delays for a lot of cargo flights. I know that FedEx and others were running way behind as you think about, the last couple of weeks with some of the weather impacts and these crazy snowstorms that have just been popping up all over the place. We have containers that have been lost at sea with volatile weather. We have them stuck in various places. So all of these are playing a big part in this. And then probably lastly, as I talked about a couple of times, COVID-19 was a huge part of this, but it's not the first global event or global health event that we've really looked at over the years. SARS in 2013 was a big deal, the H1N1, Ebola, all of these things caused us a lot of capacity constraints across the chain. There were sky-high freight rates that were going into place. So material shortages, shipping delays, there were multiple different pieces to that puzzle. But truly, I think, as we look at this slide, the interdependency here on each one of these matters, right? And Bain & Company recently, one of the big consulting companies out there, had looked at companies that prioritize their investment and actually building a plan to sustain and build resiliency into their supply chain, had like a 60% shorter product cycle, and they were able to expand capacity 25%. That kind of leads me to that bullet that's on the slide here, that supply chain resilience is a focus. 93% of the global supply chain leaders, right, really driving towards this idea that things are going to happen. Goes back to that first slide we talked about. things are going to happen. How do we deal with them? And then how do we recover quickly? Improves our competitiveness. And then again, at the end of the day, it's all about that customer experience that matters to drive us through that. A couple of pieces to this puzzle. So what are the steps? What are we going to start to go through? So let's dig down a little deeper here and talk about building resilience, right? So one of those areas is really talking about increasing capacity buffers, right? I don't think it's odd for any of us. I'm sure if I could see everyone right now and they could raise their hand, right? That how many of us over the past 2 years have put together plan A thinking that's going to work, right? And then that didn't work. So now we got to look at plan B, and maybe there was even a plan C, D, or E, right? But we've got to think ahead, and we've got to get to the point where we're never caught off guard by these things. Businesses that Christina and I talk to all over the globe are really looking at building redundancy into their supply chain in so many ways. They're increasing capacity. They're adding levels of redundancy into every stage of their supply chain. I think this truly starts with a better understanding of customer demand, customer behavior, and we'll look at this in a little bit more detail in a little bit. I think another thing mentally, and we've seen this in a lot of our customers, I think our chief revenue officer and I had a long conversation about this just a week ago about we're seeing this huge shift from a just-in-time mentality, really moving over to more of a just-in-case mentality, right? So we used to think about it as, hey, we want to hold just the amount of stock that we need just to cover demand. That's great. Keeps our costs down, keeps everything moving forward. But all of these kind of movements in the supply chain that are causing us to have to think about this, right? So just in case has become a way for us to think about holding a little bit of additional levels to cover the risk of supply delays, erratic behavior in demand across our customers, and maybe just be a new philosophy on how to do this. And we're going to talk about just in case here in just a few minutes a little bit deeper. In addition to inventory, it's not just about the inventory piece, but companies are also looking to increase capacity around their workforce, right? And when I talk about the workforce today, I think it's dramatically changing. There's been this shift from just physical people, not just thinking about physical people that, hey, we have shortages in people and people to come to work, but it's more about how do we put more automation and aid our productivity in all of our distribution facilities, factories, right? Where we're able to scale up and scale down very quickly. And most of this automation is becoming way more cost effective today as we move forward with that. So I think we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through a couple more slides here. There's been additional capacity around logistics and getting items from suppliers, and then basically again getting those units out to customers. We're seeing again container prices climbing, got truck driver shortages all over the U.S. I read an article about that yesterday, and that's climbing. And I think as all of us that are managing in the supply chain deep every day, we just need to have more options than ever before, and we need to think through what those options look like. So another area to focus on, and it's really fundamental to having the right stock to meet the customer demand, is really reviewing your supplier networks. I kind of break this down into 3 areas: diversification, localization, and vertical integration. They're just 3 components to kind of think about as you start to look at this, right? So there's a lot of businesses out there where they're just trying to find their supplier network and work through efficiencies with those to reduce the amount of stockouts that they have. There's a lot of strategies that you can deploy in this area, but I think what's most important to most of the businesses, at least that we see with EazyStock, is that most of these people are looking to diversify and maybe even increase the number of suppliers they work with, right? You may be dealing with 1 or 2 suppliers that you heavily rely on a daily basis. And if one of those happens to have something critically bad that happens, right, it could really cost you across your entire network. So being able to look at the number of suppliers you're working at. I think setting up KPIs, right, and keeping an eye on these suppliers at a whole different level where you can make better decisions is another key factor in this. It will help you to really put together better strategies for diversification overall. I think when we look at it, another reason for diversification is really this last point in that first column about spreading risk, right? We want to be able to spread the risk out over more regions, more suppliers, and we want to be able to ship, if we can, from multiple different locations. Again, unexpected disruption in one single area of that can really impede or halt operations of getting that product to the customer that we need to. So another strategy, and we're seeing this happen a lot with some very large customers, is this idea of localizing your supplier network. We're seeing companies that are nearshoring more than they ever have before. They're looking at this geographic dependence on their global network and how they can shorten shipping and delivery times. And although this might be a more expensive way to look at how we do this, we are seeing companies like General Motors, Intel, US Steel, who are actually building factories now in the US rather than overseas to be able to support a model that it might be a little bit more expensive, but at the end of the day, it's giving them a better chance of providing their customers a better overall service. So this idea of reshoring activities is something we see more and more as we go through this year. And finally, on this slide, vertical integration. Now, this is probably the most expensive area that we're going to talk about in this slide to really deploy, but vertical integration is really about how can you go across, look at your supplier base, and find a way to maybe get some M&A activity going, right? Looking at really cutting out, I call it the middleman approach, right? Cutting out the middleman, getting more right to the people that are involved in the raw materials that are helping you create your products that you're shipping and units that you're shipping to customers. There was a story recently about a very large paint company that was really trying to do this. They were trying to isolate the raw producers who are sending the raw goods to a middleman who's producing various types of chemicals for the paint. And they're going to try to cut that out by bringing that raw materials producer right into their same network and being owned by them. So it's really a way to just look at offsetting some of that cost, price, availability, right? But again, I look at that and say that may be hard for the smaller businesses because there's a high cost, but I think you have to layer that over the top of the long run. How long can I look at this before it really starts to pay off if I were to deploy some of those types of strategies? So this next slide, really digitizing the supply chain, my favorite slide probably to talk about since I've been in the software business most of my life, right? And I love the idea of what we're going to talk about here in digitizing the supply chain. And there's a lot of options, right? So the first area we're going to talk about, and probably all of you know this better than anybody, being part of the Innova family and being coming to the webinar today, is that this idea of modern databases, using a really solid ERP system, using a great warehouse management system, gives you the access to real-time data. It's going to help you to increase stock visibility. It's going to streamline your warehouse processes. But not just that, it's going to delve into the areas of pick accuracy and warehouse flexibility. Again, we want to be able to respond to the customer service levels and the demand that we're meeting. And in a resilient supply chain that uses these modern database structures, big data, analytics, real-time insights, we just can make better decisions as things happen. I think probably the most interesting piece, at least for me, loving technology like I do, is around the Internet of Things, IoT, industrial IoT, or Internet of Things. We hear about this a lot. This is really when you're talking about having your devices, software, machines, connected sensors, unique identifiers, and using radio frequency ID, for instance, allowing that particular sensor to be able to send and receive signals through data and putting that in a centralized software system somewhere where it's being able to manage all aspects of tracking the inventory, the items that are being tracked moment by moment through an entire supply chain. This could be from, from the manufacturer, putting it onto the cargo container, to a rail car, to a truck, into the warehouse, and all the way through to dispatch, right? And again, I talked about this in a very in an other slide where we talked about robots and warehouse automation becoming more and more affordable, and actually being tying this into the inventory area about utilizing the space in the factory, get much higher up of stocking in the air, of putting things up in the air, or moving a robot and being able to have that robot generally get into an area in the warehouse that would have been tough for maybe like a lift system of some sort. But you can just basically really start to look at how you can use automation more effectively. And then lastly, automated picking software, handheld devices, voice picking. All of these things are really helping to speed up picking and really helping us just move stock faster through the warehouse. All of these pieces are just a big part of what we're trying to use in the software to automatically calculate best stock locations, and then how do we use that stock effectively. The other part of this that is a fascinating piece is around AI, right? And a big piece of this is in predictive analytics. Probably the best example that I have today is EazyStock is a subsidiary of a company called Synchron. Synchron is our parent company, and Synchron does a lot of work in the field service, aftermarket parts, pricing area, and we have a predictive analytics module as well. And this really helps businesses forecast risk in their supply chain. It helps to recommend actions and responses. And one of the best areas I can talk about is I met with a tractor manufacturer, a very large global tractor manufacturer a while ago. And after the couple thousands of parts they have on a brand new $100,000 tractor, a lot of those things, like for instance, a water pump, has a sensor in it. That sensor is sending critical data back to the manufacturer saying, hey, it looks like there's fault codes that could come out of this water pump, that this water pump may be going bad in 2 weeks, right? So now that data can automatically be used. Let's say this farmer's in the height of his season and he can't have this tractor go down. We can actually make sure that that water pump is in Iowa where he's located. We're able to make sure that pump is there. We're able to make sure we can schedule a technician. We're able to make sure that if he's under warranty, we're going to get that part to him, and during harvest season, we're going to keep him up and running, all from that sensor from IoT data. So it's really just a simple way to think about it, how extreme this is. This is really beginning to change how we think about this, how we control our inventory, how we use labor planning to really drive, again, this idea of an enhanced customer experience. Lastly, in this area, I think there's simulation that goes on in this area that can be vitally important as you grow your business. Being able to simulate scenario-based type plans with technology like digital twins, it allows you to look at things that could happen in the supply chain before they happen. So it gives you a chance to make some decisions earlier and take a look at that. So technology just seems to be running it at a rate that's amazing right now. So let's talk about the 5 major areas, and I want to dig into just in case a little bit here and talk through some of this, right? So today, there are 5 major pieces to moving to a just-in-case stock management. So we're going to start talking about inventory here a little bit more. These 5 areas, accurate demand forecasting, safety stock, stock classification, anticipating stockouts, and the ability to track excess stock, are vitally important. And there's a lot of information. If you Google just in case today, or just in case inventory management today, you're going to find that a lot of references to, hey, you've got to carry more stock. You got to compensate for poor demand forecasts. This is going to increase your stock levels. You're going to be pouring investment into stock. Truth of the matter is, we are seeing it live with customers, and it doesn't have to be that way. There are simple tactics that we can put into place that can help you mitigate that supply and demand risk and still keep your inventory controls under a good cost control mechanism. So let's dig into that and talk a little about that. each one of these sections, we talk about, for instance, accurate demand forecasts. I mean, this is critical by having some type of forecasting engine that can help you build resilience into your inventory levels. It could mean carrying stock that adequately reflects your demand, and then you can decide how much extra inventory you really want to hold as a buffer. Unfortunately today, right, using a rolling average calculation or using last year's sales to predict this year, it's not going to cut it anymore. We live in such a dynamic world right now that having guesswork, the days of the guesswork are gone, right? So we believe there's a couple fundamental things that we have to take a look at, right? Reviewing the demand of profiles of your stock items. Look for those items that force out of stock items, right? What are those demand trends looking like? Are they falling? Are they rising? You know, is there a seasonal piece? What are the peaks and the troughs? I think another big area is qualitative demand data. It's so important inside the market that is changing at the pace we are today that we keep up-to-date data that you can source from getting more information from your sales team, from your customers on what their demand looks like. Also the communities that we talk to inside our businesses, our partners, like we do with Innovia. So there's great ways to look at that. Ensuring your purchasing and sales production departments are communicating. This is big. Understanding the customer piece, right? I talked about that a little earlier. At the same time, we want to have really good communication paths to our major customers. And this will really help us get down to the level of essential for accurate ordering processes. We want to remove periods where there's stockouts. And as this will make our forecast too low when we're measuring this, we want to flag periods of exclusion, or even better, if we could make some assumptions about sales that we think we lost, we want to make sure we build that into the number to get a very accurate forecast. Another area is, excuse me, is this area of safety stock. Safety stock is a key element in just-in-case strategy. Carrying extra stock to help us deal with supply chain issues and really even spikes in demand. So we really want to focus on this. Safety stock is critical to achieving our availability targets, and it's important to understand that safety stock can be calculated in addition to just your usual stock levels. And there's probably a few ways that people calculate safety stock today, from adding a simple fixed amount of buffer stock to all the items, or using statistical calculations that consider demand and lead time variance, which is so important. I think it's obvious to all of us that if you can push yourself towards using a more statistical model or a logarithmic type piece of software that can help you drive that, your calculations become more accurate over time. This is another big area that we look at when we talk about just-in-case stock strategy. Don't treat all of your items the same. It's just helping you to classify the stock items. If you use a blanket approach, it's probably not the best way to do it. We need to use kind of an ABC analysis approach where you can categorize the stock items differently by using policies for each separate group of the units. For your inventory, splitting them into groups, right? Classifying the A's, these are the most important supply chain risk areas and the ones that have the most validity in their demand. And then you can look at the B's and the C's. This is a more advanced approach to, there's a more advanced approach to this too by looking at it from PICS classification, where you can look at the items that you're picking that you sell most and ensure that your JCI policy is there to improve availability around those things. So again, you can invest in the right stock and deliver value to your customer and keep control of your cost using a very good, solid method of categorizing that stock. Anticipating stockouts, big area of problem for most of the customers that we talk to today. If you can foresee those potential stockouts, you got a great chance of acting before you get there, right? Using a risk of run report will help you understand what items are at most risk when you're running out, where are they going to run out, how are they likely going to run out. So we can just get a better handle on all of that. And really, at the end of this, right, we're looking for good calculations that can put us in a place to have accurate data on these stock levels and really get us back to having much more accurate forecasts. Preventing excess stock, huge, again, big area of focus here. And what you're seeing on the screen is kind of a very simple representation of this, right? And when I talk about JCI models that we believe are very effective, right, there are some potential risks in this model. And one of those risks is right here, right? It's this simple approach of the balance of excess levels of stock and how difficult it can be to keep this in balance. So this is a big piece of the JCI strategy, right? We don't want to get too far out of balance, right? We want to be looking at the health of our stock constantly and as best as we can to be able to look at this balance between, hey, we've got a healthy stock level that's matching the demand forecast. We have enough additional stock that we've laid in that if the stock would dip or come up again, we have enough to be able to get the customer satisfaction, get the customer what they need. But we have to be critical about what excessive stock we have on the shelf so we don't get out of balance there, as well as if that stuff sits too long, of course, it's going to be obsolete, right? Now, in this case, if you're a multi-site distribution facility or manufacturer, you're able to monitor stock levels that you can identify where the sites are that you can move this inventory back and forth to kind of keep you in a better balance. But again, this is that one of those major pieces to this that you have to be able to optimize this and look at it across the entire supply chain. So last piece of this puzzle for me, and then I'm going to turn this over to Christina to talk to you more about some of the things that we do at EazyStock to build resilience into these inventory programs. But it's transparent supply chains that rely on communication, right? You'll see this simple little 4 points that we put on the slide today. It's about communication with your suppliers, and it's about making sure that in return they're sharing details with you about further risks that they may be seeing in their supply chain, understanding how they're working with their suppliers, working down each supply tier kind of tier, and then highlighting the potential bottlenecks before they happen, right? We know that there's great ERP systems out there and WMS systems that have the functionality to take supplier lead times into account and calculating the reorder points for us. And we know how we can use those effectively. If you're a broad-based supplier, you might have to think about continuously reevaluating to ensure that you're getting the best deal in terms of unit costs from your suppliers or from the distributor networks that you're working in. Some of the ERP systems will offer you up great information in this area by placing orders that ensure that you can keep your system up to date with the most critical data, so you're able to make informed decisions. I think probably this graphic shows that best in these 4 bullets. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over to Christina right now, and she's going to talk about some of the things that go along with EazyStock. So we're going to try to make a transition here, and we're going to change presenters here for a second. So let me change this over to Christina, and we'll move this forward. Christina, do you see that?
Yes. 1 second, Gary.
Christina, I have to apologize because I'm probably way over time as usual because I talk too much, but.
Yeah, no problem at all.
There we go. Perfect.
Can everyone see my screen? Yeah.
Looks good.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Gary, for this comprehensive presentation. I'm sure all the information was very useful for sure, hopefully for everyone who's joined us today. What I would like to focus on now is how us at EazyStock specifically can help strengthen a resilience strategy, and I will focus on some specific functionality which has proved extremely useful for many of the customers that we work with, Gary has already actually touched upon a lot of this functionality, but I'd like to kind of show how this looks in EazyStock, how we work with it, and hopefully what will also bring you some benefit. Something that we have in EazyStock is order schedules. You know, an inventory optimization tool like EazyStock helps you manage supplier relationships with this order schedule feature. What you can see here is a screenshot of EazyStock's order schedule screen for a particular item, where you can see detailed information about order recommendations that are expected to be created in the future for this particular item. In the lower left corner here, you can see the expected stock graph, and you can share this information with suppliers to help set the expectations for what you'll need and when, especially as you review supplier networks, which was one of the points that Gary emphasized in the first part of the presentation. We also have something called inventory classification in EazyStock. And you know, it can really help you prioritize the right stock with the inventory policy simulation matrix. You can see how your items are arrayed throughout an 81 square matrix, and you can try different simulations as well to see how your fulfillment and spend will be impacted. So if you're looking to maximize your fulfillment while minimizing your expenditures, then you can see exactly how your inventory will perform based on which items you decide to stock. So what I'm going to go a bit more into detail here, as I think it's important that people kind of understand the principle of the inventory policy matrix. It's actually really interesting, something that's really beneficial for everyone that I personally work with. So, you know, what we're trying to determine with an inventory policy matrix is which of your items are going to be stocked and which of them are non-stocked. So, for example, if you've got items that are really expensive, or you ordered them so rarely that you might only want to place an order for them only when you get an order from a customer, then this is what we would use to facilitate that and to spread your items across this matrix so that we kind of get an equal amount in each cell. What we do is we set you know, we have a theoretical matrix, but we would typically create one of these for each of your warehouses or item categories, whichever we deem is best to do after a discussion. And we would have a value of annual usage axis, which is essentially the cost of your goods sold. So basically the items that cost you the most across the year would be at A1, as you can see on my matrix, and then the items that cost you the least across the year would be at C2. And then we would run this across the fixed frequency. So this is, you know, how often items are sold, kind of irrespective of the volume. And then an item will be assigned to a particular PICS class, kind of based on the total number of picks in a predefined period. And P8 would be your highest picks frequency. So for example, if you have something that's picked, you know, like a really high number of times per year, say for example 1,000 times per year, then it will most likely be in the P8 category. But then if you have something that's picked, for example, once a year, then it will most likely be on your P1 row. And this is all to do with the relative risk of these items. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you would have your items that would cost you the least throughout the year, but are picked most often. So these would be your low risk. And in the top left-hand corner, we would have the items that cost you the most throughout the year and are picked least often. So these would be your high-risk items. And what we want to achieve is that, you know, all of your items in the bottom right-hand corner will be stocked, and all the other ones would be non-stocked as they represent a higher risk. In this simulation, you can basically play around with this functionality and decide what goes into non-stocked. So those would be the grayed out areas, and what goes into the stock cells. And you can kind of tick and untick cells as you wish, and then you will get a value, a projected value, depending on how you decide to use this functionality. Something else that's really useful, especially to begin with, is the risk of runout report. So actually, as soon as we manage to get data in EazyStock, the risk of runout report functionality becomes immediately available and is something that's really useful to all the customers that I've worked with. It's basically a report which is auto-generated for you using current stock levels, demand forecast, and current lead times. And it gives you an indication on what parts are running out of stock that you may need to take some action on. So there may be parts that you already have on order, but as a planner, you might want to chase up that order to see if you can get it in sooner. And this kind of strengthens your relationship with your suppliers as well. This is where this screen comes in handy. You have a few metrics here. So you've got the risk of runout threshold. It's the value that we set in the system. Typically start off at 0, and then kind of as people become more experienced with using EazyStock, we change that value to whatever is needed. So for example, it could be the buffer stock level. It could be half of the buffer stock level. It just depends what is deemed as appropriate at the time. We also have the shortfall, so how many units you're short and how long you're going to be short for. And you can basically filter on any one of these particular fields. And you've also got maximum runout time and total runout time. This relates to your lead time. So, you know, if you place an order today, you'll basically be out of stock for a specific number of days. The risk of runout engine is a standard feature. And so you will be getting this, you know, as a standard within EazyStock. It's not something that has to be requested. It's just part of the system. And if there's any risk of a run out during the lead time for any particular item, you will basically be alerted. The risk of runout calculation as well is performed during every processing run, which happens basically daily. So the report will be updated with the latest information every day. We also have a redistribution functionality. So in EazyStock, you know, using up every item in your inventory is easy with this capability, especially for companies with multiple stock keeping locations. What this feature does is it helps you identify where you currently have items stored in your supply chain, and then you can evaluate whether it's more cost effective to transfer them to where they're needed or to reorder what you need. But instead of just purchasing new stock of pieces that you already perhaps have in your supply chain, you can choose to redistribute this stock from a different location. Lastly, in EazyStock, it's very easy to make sure that every shipment is filled with business critical items with the order fill up feature. What you can do is you can simply enter the requirement that you need to hit, you know, whether that's by order value, volume, or weight. And our solution will populate the purchase order with the correct amount of the next needed item from that supplier. So it will basically look into the future and bring those orders forward to make sure that you're filling up the container to the appropriate value. The list at the bottom shows which items are up next to be ordered from a particular supplier, and it will also include the next order date, which means you can proactively prepare for that item's demand while filling out a shipment. Okay. That concludes the functionality part for me. So I now would like to talk a little bit about EazyStock, and I will start off with a business case example. So what we're looking at here is, you know, what some of our customers can achieve through using EazyStock, and this is just one of the many business case examples that we work with. So we can achieve stock reduction. This is more, you know, for normal times, and it shows how EazyStock reduces excess inventory. However, we do understand that in today's circumstances, it's not always a bad thing to have more on hand. especially with some of the supplier issues. And we're just here to kind of give you an insight on what can be reduced if it's necessary, but of course it's up to you whether or not you want to take those steps to reduce the stock or not. But with EazyStock in normal times, typically we can achieve a 20 to 30% stock reduction. We also have productivity gains, so 30 to 60% increased productivity. This is related to reduced manual administration. Of course, this depending on the starting point. So some businesses are a bit more streamlined, some of them, and in fact the majority of the businesses that I sit down with and have initial conversations, during the discovery sessions where we try to understand kind of what the current processes are and map them to what they would like to be in EazyStock. One of the things that we come across most often is how much time people are spending trying to kind of manually calculate how much they need to order when they place an order. The fact that they have to use spreadsheets, and sometimes they're having difficulties with these. It's very easy to kind of have a lot of data which needs to run on a spreadsheet, and sometimes you get errors with those as well. It's very easy, and people are kind of prone to making errors. We're only human after all, right? And something that is an immediate benefit with EazyStock, and a lot of the feedback that we get is that it reduces a lot of this manual work. Of course, that's kind of the point. We're trying to automate these processes and free up some of that time for people to spend on more strategic decisions. In terms of the service level, we give you a standardized way and KPIs to measure the service level, increase the sales, and you would have fewer express orders as well. Who we serve? We work with an array of industries. We have wholesale, distribution, manufacturing, retail, e-commerce, so a bit of everything really. In terms of size, small to medium businesses with a revenue between 5 and 200 million and an inventory value between 1 and 50 million. We work with make to stock, buy to stock, make to reorder, but something that's really important to mention is that we focus on non-perishable. And we also work with, single or multi-site businesses as well. I'd like to give a bit more context. Gary has already touched on this already, but just to put this in a bit more context. So EazyStock is the leading inventory optimization app due to the backing of our parent company, Synchron. Synchron have been operating for over 25 years with original equipment manufacturers and dealer networks for inventory solutions. So they work with businesses like Toyota, Mazda, JCB, which I'm sure you all have heard about. They operate across 90 countries now and in more than 20,000 stock locations. And something that's really good about Synchron is the amount of investment that they put back into the product. So you might be wondering where EazyStock came from. Well, it came from an understanding that these large multinational enterprise businesses are great to target, but actually the solution would work just as well for wholesalers, aftermarket parts. So, all of those industries that I mentioned on my previous slide, that run, for example, 1 or 2 locations and a little more locally than being across the whole world. EazyStock is essentially the same system as Synchron, but it's just adapted slightly to meet the needs of these small and mid-sized businesses. It's a fully cloud-based system, so you can access the UI through your web browser, and this makes the deployments quick, easy, and low cost. There is a standardized integration with all the ERP systems, so flat files are pulled out and sent over every evening to our SFTP location. EazyStock will then download these and process them, and then for the morning it will have all the latest data from your ERP system. And something else that's really good about EazyStock is that all of the new releases are given to you for free. So all the new functionalities that come as part of these upgrades are not something that you would pay for. For some ERPs, such as Nav, Business Central, we have API integrations which facilitate fast direct connections. And actually, I have a bit more information on this on the next slide. So EazyStock is on AppSource. Both our software and the pre-built integration to Business Central are available on AppSource. EazyStock owns this integration and handles support on BC. We also have a nav connector, even though this is not listed on AppSource, but it is available, and we can facilitate this. As of the first quarter of 2022, I believe we have about 26 nav integrations and just over 20 Business Central integrations. For Business Central clients, you can download the connector directly from AppSource, and for the connector to work, of course, a signed annual subscription to EazyStock software needs to be in place. But you can also download the extension from within the Business Central environment. Okay, so now the exciting part, which Gary mentioned at the start of the presentation, stock health analysis. So we would like to offer everyone who has taken the time to join us today a stock health analysis completely free of charge. To give you a brief idea of what this entails, it's created by loading your data into a personalized EazyStock instance and reviewed by one of our experts, who will then provide an assessment of your inventory that will help you understand your current performance and will also give you the intelligence necessary to take actions today that will help you improve the health of your business tomorrow. This comes with absolutely no strings attached. It's purely as a thank you for being here with us today. So thank you very much for your time. And I will share a slide with Gary's contact details, so you can reach out if you want to discuss EazyStock in more detail, or if you just want to drop by the EazyStock stand at the conference in May, which I will let Gary say a few words about.
Thank you, Christina. That was awesome. And Joe, are you out there as well?
I'm here.
I'm here. Perfect. All right, cool. So again, my contact info is right here. If there's anything more that I could do, Christina could do, or if it's even easier just to reach out to your contact at Innovia. Of course, Joe's here with us right now. I personally am coming to Notre Dame here in just a couple of weeks and really excited about presenting there as well. And we're going to have a booth there. So please feel free to stop by, say hello. And with that, Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you. But thank you again, everyone, for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary. We have a couple questions that came in. The first one is, how can we handle changing lead times?
Yes, I will take over that question. So in EazyStock, we have a functionality called dynamic lead time. And the way that that works is it basically assesses your supplier performance. So we can set that up to begin with as an alert, which means it will look at what the static lead time is, so what is received from within your ERP, and then it will compare it to the actual lead time, so the time that your order was received. And then it will alert you that, you know, some kind of variance exists between your static lead time and the actual lead time. Based on that, we can then turn it into an automated feature. So the system will then use the dynamic lead time rather than the static lead time when placing the order, which will affect things like you know, your order level and the quantity that you'll be ordering when you do place that order.
Okay. The second one here is, we've already seen interruption to our supply for certain items. How can we handle those items going forward?
Yeah, so you know, this is something that we come across a lot. Actually, so you know, there is no there is no clear answer to this. It just kind of depends on each individual situation, right? But there are ways that we can handle these particular items going forward. So first of all, we can use the risk of runout report, which is one of the features that I talked about today. And that will help us basically prioritize the inventory. So, you know, we can see what items are at risk of running out within the lead time. And based on that information, we can definitely prioritize those items, reach out to our suppliers, see if anything can be done about it. Another thing that we can do is, you know, try to find alternative suppliers for particular items, if that is an option. Or just generally improve our relationship with the existing suppliers to make sure that we fulfill all of our demand.
Very good. And last one here, I'm sure is something everybody can relate to. We can't get all the inventory that we need right now. How are we supposed to fulfill our orders?
Yes, again, this kind of you know, relates back to one of the issues that a lot of businesses are facing right now. And again, there is no specific or clear answer. But if you remember during the presentation, we talked about the redistribution capability, especially for businesses that are multi-site. So if you know, you've got some stock available at a different location, for example, EazyStock will pick up on this. It will highlight the fact that the stock is available at a different location, and it will suggest an order from that location before suggesting an order directly with your supplier. If that's not an option, then again, you know, some of the things that I mentioned perhaps at the previous question would be valid for this as well. So you could try to reach out to alternative suppliers. Sometimes what people tend to do, if they're part of a group, they will reach out to different businesses within that group and see if they have any available stock that they could supply, even as an interim solution until things kind of ease out a little bit.
Very good. Well, thank you. It looks like we don't have any additional questions right now. So I want to thank Gary and Christina for presenting today, and everyone on today's webinar, or if you're watching on demand, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us. And just a reminder, we have new training workshops for you and your team members to attend. Visit our training workshops page at innovia.com/workshops for more information and to register for the training workshops that fit your role. We also have more webinars coming up. Next week, on the 28th, we have ADP presenting on why evolve your employment practices. So you can check out our website for that and for more of our upcoming webinars and events, and that's at innovia.com/events. And don't forget to check out our Innovia Conversation podcast with hosts Steve Woltz and Jeff Bergolski. You can find out all the different platforms to listen to them on our podcast page, and that's at innovia.com/podcasts. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast library and be sure to subscribe to receive notifications when new episodes air. And we have some conferences coming up, including our customer conference, which Gary mentioned that they're going to be at EazyStock's going to be at. And that's at Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, and that's coming up on May 4th and 5th. For information about that and a list of all our upcoming conferences, please head over to innovia.com/conferences. I want to thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at another Innovia webinar. Thank you, Gary and Christina.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good day.